As we started researching overfishing, we began to realize that this global problem is much more prominent and pertinent than any of us realized.
We decided to ask some of our fellow students what they know about it. We're also going to share with them some of the information we found the most shocking and surprising, and we'll see if this information opens their eyes as well.
Let's go.
Graydon, what do you know about overfishing?
Overfishing is when either civilians or large industries will take more fish than they're actually allowed, and it will deplete the populations. And it happens like in Lake Erie, like with perch and things like that. But it also happens with bycatch, with I don't know, international fishing, and the bycatch they'll just kill them and throw them back in the water and stuff like that.
Nothing. And for some species it's a problem, but I feel like for majority of it it's just not that relevant.
I know it's a problem.
Is that it?
Well, I mean, I don't really know much about it, so.
It's actually a bigger problem than a lot of people realize. It actually affects us more than you know. Just as an instance, I was on an airplane with a guy, or I went to Florida, and a dude sat next to me. He was actually head of the fisheries and marine life in New Jersey, and he told me there's a really big problem with the cod in New England and the scallops. So that's all I know about the East Coast, really, but I do know that it is a rising problem.
Overfishing is most easily defined as taking fish out of the ocean at a rate that is faster than fish populations will be able to repopulate themselves naturally. This is a growing problem in Earth's oceans.
Did you know that at current fishing rates, marine life used for seafood will collapse before 2050?
I did not know that, actually. That's really bad. There's a lot of fish.
I mean, I didn't know the exact number, year, but in one of my classes we talked about this a lot, and it was kind of stated that our a human's consumption of fish and meat in general is not sustainable at our current capacity, and so it's not surprising, but it's kind of terrifying to know that there are just gonna be fish someday that don't exist that I kind of grew up with.
Before 2050? I didn't know that, but that doesn't surprise me.
I did not.
Does that surprise you?
Not really, with how widespread kind of seafood is, especially because that's a focal point in a lot of different cultures.
It is surprising.
Yeah, you don't really think of fish as running out, so that's weird.
Human populations are expected to increase to more than 9 billion people by 2050, and this, combined with an ever-accelerating decline in fish biodiversity and general fish population, could easily spell the collapse of seafood populations by 2050.
What's the most destructive fishing technique that you know of?
Probably gill netting or dredging, things like that, long lines.
Can you explain this?
Where they have nets that have the holes are just the right size for the fish's head to fit through, but once it gets stuck in there, the only way to get the fish out usually can be to either kill them or it does a lot of damage to the fish, and it can hurt species that they're not trying to catch, because if they catch them in the net, they're gonna hurt them.
О, здоровый, жирненький какой! Устал, блядь, бедняга. Да сейчас ебется, блядь. Давай нахуй ныряй, ёб твою мать. Ну раз съебался, блядь. Давай, давай, нахуй, жирный. Да здоровый, да? Вообще.
I don't know of any fishing techniques.
It's like whale fishing, whatever, where they like harpoon whales. I know that's a big problem.
Whaling.
Yeah. Is that what it's called?
I don't know what it's called, but I know like for some mollusks that live in like actually in the dirt, they actually have to dig them up, which when they do that kills the environment for like the fish that live in the water because it tears up the vegetation and stuff like that.
Netting, which is where they will take really large nets and put them over like 2 miles and just drag them for however long, and then they'll pull them up and they'll catch like sharks and dolphins and all that along with what they're actually trying to catch, and they'll already be dead because it'll get in their like gills or whatever and tear the fish up, and then they just die anyway. So
there are trawling vessels that cast nets with an opening of up to 23,000 meters squared, the size of 4 football pitches, and big enough to hold 13 jumbo jets, or more commonly, more than 500 tons of fish.
Some of the most dangerous and damaging forms of fishing include using cyanide or even dynamite to kill fish while they were still in the water, then collect them off the surface. This causes major damage to the seafloor, coral reefs, and other species.
Wouldn't cyanide be in the fish then and poison you?
I didn't know about cyanide though. I wouldn't have expected that.
Do you know anything that's being done or could be done to combat overfishing?
There's like regulations, like I fish in Canada, and there's like some regulations on like size and the amount that you can take in.
Just like setting tighter regulations and laws and restrictions.
You could do it like seasons in a way, like only, catch a certain species of fish at certain times of the year so that you give them time to repopulate and to like raise their offspring. So yeah.
Not really, but I think just the simple fact of letting them do their thing and just taking a second and not, but that has a whole nother effect on economical things that politicians don't like to converse, but.
The majority of European fish stocks are overfished. Historically, EU fisheries ministers have set fishing limits exceeding scientific advice. In 2008, fishing limits were defined for the highly prized bluefin tuna. Scientists recommended a fishing limit of 10,000 tons to rebuild the increasingly depleted population. However, the EU and other fishing nations decided on a fishing limit of 29,500 tons, 3 times what scientists had suggested. Then, despite this already inflated limit, 61,000 tons of bluefin tuna were caught. That is 6 times more than the recommended limit. Billions of euro in public subsidies are fueling this overfishing. If this continues, soon there will be no fish left.
One of the leading countries in the fight against overfishing is Iceland. For example, Iceland has implemented a system where the country's fleets as a whole cannot exceed a certain amount of fish caught per year, with this number being set by non-government independent researchers. There are also government inspectors that can shut down fishing industries that are suspected of going beyond these numbers. Additionally, Iceland, along with the European Union, has made some of the largest strides towards completing ending trawling in their waters.
Does this information open your eyes?
No, I think it's good to see that countries are actually starting to do something about it, because I feel like a lot of times people bring up these big issues and people are like, yep, that's an issue, but they don't do anything about it. So I think maybe that one country's doing it now, other countries will follow suit.
I mean, it terrifies me, and it opened my eyes when I learned it in my class. But yeah, no, this is incredibly worrying.
Yeah, I've realized that's actually kind of a big problem.
Yeah, mostly because this is something I've never thought about and probably will never think about again. So, you know, the more you know, I guess.
I mean, yeah, it kind of provides like a bigger insight into really what's going on a global scale instead of just like what's around our community or just like Lake Erie or whatever lake, you know, I know of. So that is really interesting. And I'm glad that like, even though there's a lot of bad stuff going on, there's countries that realize, like Iceland, that they're like, hey, you know, stop before it gets too far.
It's just as we expected. Not many people knew how big of a problem overfishing is or how it's being addressed.
Did you know that overfishing was as big of a problem as it is? Just think about it the next time you eat fish, and maybe you'll consider that cooked fish to be food for thought.